Hi, this is Roger. Thanks for dropping by. Welcome to the Orchid Progress Updates set of videos, round 2. Yeah. Now I'm going to do a brief explanation of what's going on. Some people could be new, some people could have missed this, some people may have just joined the channel. So the idea of this is there are a set of orchids going back to the beginning of 2003, so a year ago, that were worked on in January, February and March, and in this case they were all repotted at that time. In one case there was a split, but that's when the work was done. We then did the first update on those in June, yeah? And that started the ball rolling. So these orchids are endearingly known as set 1. They will always be set 1 and they will stay together. And the idea was that we had a look at them 3 months after the work was done, roughly, to see how they were progressing. And I said at the time that we may revisit them again, and that's what this video is. We are revisiting set 1 6 months after the last update. Yeah, and in this case it's effectively a year later. So the work was done January, February and March. We're looking at them again in, well, January, and we will continue this with set 2, 3, 4 till we get to the last one, set 7, and we will be doing them at the beginning of each month. So that's where we are. We have had one loss out of this set. The Bialara Marfitch Renaissance Coral got dumped at some point. It wasn't growing anyway, as you can see from the last thing. Now the idea is, what I would like you to do, unless you've got a good memory and don't choose not to, is go and look at the video that was the first update. That's where these plants were first reviewed to see how they were doing after their initial repots. And I will make it as easy as possible. There is a link in the description which you can just click on and it will take you to that video. So you can pause this one, go and have a look at that one and then come back to this one and pick up where you left off. Alternative to the link in the description is an info card which comes up in the top right hand corner, and if you can't use either of those facilities, then I'm going to put the name of that original video on the screen so that you can search YouTube for it and find it that way. Because even if you're on a smart TV, you have got a search facility. So the info card and the name of that video are coming up now. Okay, if you've been away and had a slight pause, welcome back. If you haven't, then you know, you've missed out on that video. So yeah, without further ado, let's get going. And I need to keep the coffee going because I've still got a croaky throat. And there's 14 plants to get through, and the plants are now in the correct order. They weren't in the correct order in the previous video. They are now, and this is the order they will stay in. So we're starting off in January. And on the 18th of January, we worked on this Brassia. This is Brassia Santa Barbara. And at the time, we had some new growths and some new roots. Well, the new growths haven't progressed that well, but they are progressing. And in addition, we have some more new growths. So we've now got 1, 2, 3, 4 new growths, some of which are pushing out roots. So this plant I wouldn't say is doing exceptionally well because the old part of the plant is quite desiccated, but the new growths are pushing on, and given the longer days and the better temperatures, it should do okay this year in the growing season. Now Brassias in the Oncidium Alliance, yes, but these are up the warmer end and the brighter end. So as Oncidiums go, these like good light, yeah? And they also like it to be a bit warmer than some of them, because in the Alliance you've got the Odontoglossums and they do not like heat. They're cool growers. But these are up the higher end of intermediate to look after them well. So we'll see how that one does, but still with us, that's the good thing. Right, so that was the first one. The next one is the, well, I'm going to call it prosthetia because I can say that. But basically it's a Guarchia Black Comet. Well, the Black Comet bit's definite. Now this was just getting going when we looked at it last time. Since then, this growth has matured okay. It's pushed up a new growth that has also matured, and it has a sheath with an internal sheath that looks very much like it might actually bloom. If it does, it will be a first time bloomer for me. It's grown some roots, and some roots are still coming out from the base of that growth. So it's got roots, it's got a new growth that's a reasonable size, and it has a sheath. I'm hoping we get some blooms on that. If not, it should definitely bloom on the next new growth when it matures. So doing okay, no problems with that one at all. So that's January done. Both of those were worked on the 18th. I'll be doing pop-ups of the plant names, the date they were worked on, and what they were repotted in, so that you've actually got it on the screen, and a picture of the blooms if I've got one. So that will be as we progress. Right, so the next one we had a faff with, but the faff has solved a riddle, because I had a plant that I didn't have an ID for, and I couldn't for the life of me work out what it was. And as a consequence of the faffing around, I've now identified that plant. It's because it had no tag. The reason it had no tag was when it was repotted, we didn't know what it was, hence no tag. Well, it was since established what it actually was, looking at the blooms, looking it up on the internet, and I've now done a tag for that one. That's nothing to do with this set, but it was a consequence of the next orchid looking at it thinking, is that the same as the one in the last video? It put that doubt in my mind. Anyway, that was that. Right, so the next one is an odont type that is doing very badly, but nonetheless it's still with us. And this is Odontoglossum anaclare. It's in a sorry state. This pseudobulb was rotted and totally desiccated. The last new growth rotted, therefore was cut off. What we've got left is two bulbs with some very tatty leaves and nothing else. There are some roots in the pot, so the hope for this plant is that a new growth not only starts but actually succeeds, because the previous one didn't. So not in a good way, not doing well at all, which is a shame, but there's always a but. We took off a back bulb that had a little new growth last time round. Well, we've now got a nice, not fully matured size-wise, but nonetheless matured, new growth with roots. The back bulb has completely rotted and is soft, but I'm not going to remove it because this will get repotted when I start to get round to... Those that got put in sphagnum moss are going to get an annual repot. Yeah, I don't want that going stale. So that's on the list to be done. At that time, which is probably March, maybe April, maybe this will have started another new growth, which will then produce some more roots. But that's the point I will cut that bulb off, when it's out of the pot and I can see what I'm doing. So the back bulb worked okay, and the growth has matured. And it's now got a tag so that I don't forget what it is. Right, so that's those two. I don't very often do back bulbs, I can't be bothered with the fuss, but that one is such a rare plant with such a nice bloom, I thought it was worth a try. Good job really, because the main plant may be lost. Right, so that was that one. The next one is a Zygopetalum. Is this the one? Yes. Now when we looked at this, I wouldn't say it was doing well, but it did have some signs of new growths. It had a very strange pseudobulb that tried to bloom out of the top of the bulb, which I stopped. Now that's not the normal place for a zygospike to come out from, but it has done it before. But basically what we've got now is one reasonable new growth that is pushing on. This one is stalled, and this one round here is probably stalled as well, because they haven't moved, they haven't grown at all for a long time. But we do have a nice root system, which for zygos is imperative. That has to be maintained at all costs. So it's okay, and it's still with us. Not brilliant, just okay. Right, so that was that one. The next one is one we've looked at quite often. Oh, I don't believe it. What can I do to stop that? Unplug it. Sorry, the heater's just come on. It's because the door's shut. I'll just unplug it for now. It is cold outside. You don't want that noise and whirring going on. Right, where did we get to? The next one is Paphiopedilum blackjack. This has just finished blooming, literally. So what we're looking for now is new fans maturing that haven't bloomed. And we have one here that's pushing on quite nicely. That's a non-bloomer. The one behind it has bloomed, as have most of them now. And in addition to that one, I'm pretty sure that somewhere, I'm sure there was a second one. Oh yes, there, down at the front of the pot there. So we've got a new growth just starting here, and we have a fan here that hasn't bloomed. We also have a very nice pot full of roots on this. I'm quite proud of those roots on that plant. I mean, I did nothing more than repot it in what I thought was a suitable media, and it just took off. The root system just took off. So I'm pretty sure the fans that are growing on will mature and bloom, and I suspect we will get some more new growths, quite honestly. But it's doing very well, very pleased with that. It's a nice plant. The two previous spikes that have finished now both had 2 blooms on, which is unusual, not common for that type of path. So that's doing very well. The next one is an Aliciara, which is an Oncidium intergeneric basically. And when we looked at this last time, we had some new growths pushing on, and what we've got now is that those new growths have matured and both have spikes on. So this is about to come into bloom in the not too distant future. New growth here, and the other new growth was around this side. The bulbs are about the same size as the other bulbs, slightly smaller you might say from the very oldest bulb, but they're near enough to be mature enough to allow this to bloom. Now this will be fragrant when the blooms come out. Its parentage has got 50% of Oncidium sotoanum in it, which is a highly fragrant orchid, and is one of the mainstays in the hybridization programs of the Oncidium Alliance. It's a strong grower under normal circumstances. I've got one lurking somewhere, I'm sure. Anyway, so this has progressed nicely. It's got a pot full of roots. It's done very well with its roots, and once it's finished blooming, it will start new growths again and push on. And it might get to stay in that pot. It might get to stay in that pot. The media's not old, it hasn't got any moss in it, providing it will fit into that pot and the new growths can get roots down into the said pot, then it can stay in the pot for another cycle. So that one's doing fine. No problems with that one. Next on the list is more coffee. Right, next one is, it's labelled as Cambria because that's what it was when I got it. It's a no ID Oncidium intergeneric basically. There's no other way of describing this. Cambria is quite honestly, it's a non-existent intergeneric name. I mean, once upon a time it was a valid thing, but its content has been renamed and reclassified. It's just like a lot of the trade just use it to mean orchid. They call everything a Cambria that's an orchid. You know, even I've seen a Phalaenopsis called a Cambria. So anyway, this one was pushing up new growths. We were hoping to get those to mature, and it would be nice to see some blooms. One growth has matured here with a nice bulb. The bulb is not full size yet, but this one does have very narrow pseudo bulb, so it's difficult to tell when it's finished. This skinny one here, that actually bloomed successfully on that size bulb, so I see no reason why this bulb shouldn't bloom. And then the other new growth is round here and is still pushing on and is less mature at the moment. And starting round this side of the plant, tucked down in there, is another new growth. So this one is doing okay. There's a reasonable amount of roots in the pot. I wouldn't say it's full of roots, but there are roots. And these latest two new growths that are maturing are still producing new roots down into the pot. And again, that one can stay in its pot providing anything that grows fits in the pot. No moss in the pot, and it's not old media. You know, it's only a year old basically. So that's doing okay. That's doing okay. Lovely blooms on that. Right, next, that was the Cambria. Next we've got Cheyenne, which is this one. Now this one has a problem. We looked at it last time round. Last time it had two new growths starting to grow that didn't look right, and they're not right. But one of them looks like it might grow out of it. This growth is distorted. It's just not going to grow. It's failed, and it's distorted in as much as the leaves are all tangled up together. It's not a clean growth. This one was the same, but it's pushed on. It's managed to untangle itself, and it is growing successfully now. So it looks like it's sort of recovering. It hasn't got a very good root system. And so far, this new growth that's started to grow now hasn't produced new roots. So this is still in a weak state. But the older bulbs are not completely desiccated. And if this growth pushes on and matures and succeeds, then I would say it's rescued successfully. Yeah, it was just Oncidium Cheyenne it was labelled as. That will be a trade name. I doubt if that's registered. But yeah, I like the blooms, and it looks like the plant may sort itself out. In this set, that's not the only one of those. We've got another one to look at in a minute. These distorted growths. So that's that one, Cheyenne, and the next one is Bobcat. Talking of which, right, now this one has produced very large pseudobulbs for an Oncidium alliance type, starting with this one which was already there, and then this one I grew and it bloomed. This massive one here I grew and it bloomed, and that's what it's doing now. It's badly distorted, that growth, and I don't know what it's going to do. It's just not pushing out proper leaves. They're all wrinkled. It's almost as though something's ripped them to pieces. If it has, I can't think what. It's just very distorted and not right. Down here, you probably can't see it, is another tiny new growth that has failed to grow. So this is what there is. That is not going to succeed. That is not going to mature and look right and bloom. So I'm hoping at some point that this will start another new growth that I can then work with. There's plenty of reserves in the plant, you know, despite not having a very good root system. It's got some roots, they're just not brilliant, but there's plenty of reserves in the plant. Big fat bulbs. All three of these old bulbs are solid and a good size. So that one's a wait and see. I really don't quite know why that suddenly decided to do that when it was fine before. But anyway, that's how it is, as they say. Next is more coffee again while I have a look and see where we are. Right, so the next one is another Zygopetalum, and this is a unnamed hybrid as such. This was starting to produce some new growth last time, but they didn't look strong, and basically they weren't strong. This one I don't think is going to mature much more. It hasn't got a proper bulb, it's weak, as is this one in the same boat. And then down the side here it started some more new, very weak new growths. So this one doesn't want to grow. It has got some roots, and there's active roots, and there's new roots coming out of those new growths, but it won't get going, it won't push. Now it could be that Zygopetalums are strange because some of them grow up the tops of trees, some of them grow right down in the deep shade, some are terrestrial, some are epiphytes, some are warmer growers and some are cooler growers. If that hybrid has got the majority of warmer growers within it, then that might explain why it's not doing so well, because it doesn't like the cooler temperatures. Difficult to find out, but anyway, it's growing, it's not dead, but it's not doing well. It hasn't produced a strong growth, I'll say yet, because it still might do. That's that. Right, where are we? Miltonia next. Are you going to come out of your black pot, or are you going to mess me about? No, you're going to come out. Right, last time we looked at this, we had new growths pushing out all over the place. We didn't have much of a root system forming, but some of the growths did have some roots starting to grow. Now, most of these new growths are probably not going to grow anymore, and some of them are not fully matured. They're not full size. I mean, this is one here, that's a good one. Coming round, this is a good one, but there's some roots underneath there. This one, not so good, quite small. And then there's a gap, and then coming round here, we've got one here that's not very big at all. The one next to it's even smaller. And then again, another small one here, and another one here that's in between all of those. So this is, some parts of it are doing okay, and some parts aren't. And you have to bear in mind there's 4 entirely separate plants in there, and that did get moss in it. So come the repotting time to replace sphagnum moss, which I will be doing, this will come out of the pot. And at that point, given that there's 4 plants in there, I don't want 4 plants. So what I will probably do is decide on the 2 strongest, pot those up separately, and maybe put the 2 weak ones in a pot to grow on, possibly for somebody else, because they might pull on with some fresh media, you never know. You know, there's different, the reason the different new growths have developed at different rates and to different sizes is probably due to the resources in what is behind those new growths. And some of these plants, 4 plants, might not have been as strong as each other. That's a very easy explanation. You know, the new growths were dependent on resources in the back of the plant, each individual one, because they didn't have good roots. None of them did. So anyway, there's at least 1 good plant there, if not 2. We shall see how that progresses. That's that one. Next we've got a set of 3. They've always been a set of 3. They've always been together because they were bought without names. So by keeping them together, I sort of established the fact that we don't know what these 3 are, but we got them at the same time. That's not very logical, is it? Not for me. But that's how it started out. And then gradually, we managed to identify 2 out of the 3, which means I now know all 3 of them, because 2 of them have got names and 1 hasn't. So it's just called hybrid. So I know what it is now. And the 2 that have got names have got very similar blooms. Or have they? No, I don't think they have. Anyway, they're all odontoglossum based types in the Oncidium Alliance. So they're cool growers, they've all bloomed, and well, one's still in bloom now. So we'll start with the first one, which is in bloom, which is, I'm calling it Odontoglossum, but in fact it's an Odontocidium, which, given that the Odontoglossums have been reclassified as Oncidiums, it's an Oncidium. Nonsense? Absolutely. But basically it's got a good portion of Odontoglossum in it, and the rest of it's probably Oncidium of some sort. Now this went in the sphagnum, perlite and small bark mix, which seems to work pretty well for generating roots and for these types of plants. Nonetheless, the fact that it's got moss in it, it will get repotted. You get the impression there's quite a bit of repotting to do this year. I took that on board. When I got the new sphagnum moss, the New Zealand moss, I got a large bale on the grounds that if I'm going to use it, it's good for generating roots and it needs to be refreshed. So I got a giant bale of the stuff, knowing that everything that got potted in it in year one will need repotting in year two. Anyway, this one's in bloom. It's got a new growth here pushing on that hasn't matured, that may well mature, but this is two plants. And this left hand, well, it's my left, so whatever it is on the screen there, too complicated. There's the division down there. This plant, this side, is not as strong. The new growth hasn't matured properly yet. It may carry on slowly. The other side of the plant is bigger and stronger with more bulbs that are plumper. And the latest growth here is the one with the spike on. So both of these plants are doing okay. These, when this gets repotted, they will get separated out. I'm going to try and stop putting multiple plants in the same pot unless there's a very good justification. And not having enough space is not a good enough reason. I can find space. When these two get repotted, they will both go in a smaller pot than this. They're not going to go in the same size pot. They'll be much smaller plants. They'll go in much smaller pots. So, yeah, space is not an excuse. Plants are difficult to come by in the UK now. We haven't got that many nurseries left. I mean, the only two ones with a good variety of plants, I would say, one is open to the public, which is Burnham's, one is not, which is Spice Exotics. But those are the two that have got the variety. There isn't much else, and you know, without a lot of faff and quite a lot of expense, you can't order from the EU anymore. We can't get the stuff across without oodles of paperwork and that. So plants have become more valuable. When you divide a plant, the division has value now, not to be sniffed at. You know, as orchid growers in the UK, we're going to have to do more sharing to keep plants going. You know, if a plant's not doing well for you and you divide it, give the division or sell it to somebody else. You may save it, and it could be a rare plant, it could be a rare hybrid. You know, some of the mass-produced Oncidium Alliance types, the cross was done, they were happy with it, it was mericloned by the 1,000, everybody had one, and they've never done the cross again. So as those plants reduce in number, shall we say, they become scarce. So, you know, got to do our bit. Right, this is the one without a name. So this is the one called hybrid. The new growth here, again, this is two plants. There's the division there. So this plant, this side, is the weaker one, and the new growth on there hasn't matured with a full-size bulb. The one the other side may do, but again, new growth hasn't produced a full-size bulb yet. Now this one has got some new roots growing near the top, but not many. It's not got a good root system at the moment, but I'm hoping that will be revitalised at the repot time. At repot time, we may adjust the amount of moss. I will probably use the same mix, which is the small bark, perlite and the New Zealand sphagnum moss, I will probably use the same mix, but that doesn't have to mean I use the same quantities. I could be heavier on the bark next time round. We shall see. We haven't got there yet. And then the last one, the other one in this set of 3, we did eventually identify, and I did a very thorough identification and was happy that it was accurate. I think somebody suggested this and I went and had a look and I thought, yeah, I'm having that. And it is a Zelenkosidium calico gem, and this is a single plant, so this isn't 2. The latest new growth on it isn't bad, but it is slightly desiccated, which it shouldn't be as it's the new growth, because that's the one that should have grown lots of roots, and it didn't. So it's not as strong as it should be. Nonetheless, I think next time this is repotted, its new growth should do much better. At least it produced one. It has bloomed. That's possibly why it's a little bit weak. Maybe I shouldn't have let that one bloom. But nonetheless, we will see what we can do with the next growth. But as I said, that is a single plant. Not a pair like the others. Right, so there we go. That is set 1 revisited. I might even call it that. But that's the idea. And then at the beginning of February, I'll get all the plants out that were set 2 and we'll re-look at those. Effectively 6 months on-ish. And so we will progress. Now the idea of doing them at the beginning of the month may not be obvious, but come March, April time probably, unless we have any emergencies, I'm going to start work again. We might be generating some new sets, but I don't want lots of crossover, if you see what I mean, because like I've just, as you've seen here, there are plants here that are set 1 that were worked on at the beginning of last year. Some of those are going to get worked on again at the beginning of this year. Well, if I make a new set out of them, it's all going to get confusing. So I've still yet to think that through. But they will probably stay in their original set. And part of the progress update will be to say that it's been repotted and when it was done and what it was repotted in. That's probably what will happen. Anyway, these are a bit of a faff to put together, mainly because of getting all the plants out and then trying to work out where the hell I got them from and put them back somewhere near where they were before. And in addition to that, obviously there's lots of pop-ups and getting the pictures of the blooms, which, you know, they have to be imported from a folder with all my photos in. So they are a bit fiddly, but nonetheless, people are always asking me how things are getting on. And this seems a good way of formalising that. So even though some of these plants nobody may have asked about, you've got them anyway. So everything eventually gets a look at, if you see what I mean. So that's the idea. The next one of these will be at the beginning of February and it will be for set 2. And I hope you've enjoyed it. Make your comments. Anything you think I ought to change, please say so. I might not change it, but if you don't ask, nothing's going to happen, is it? And leave your comments. They're important to me. Say what you think. Like this sort of thing. I started thinking about doing spotlight videos, but they are quite self-contained. And the people who are going to be interested in a spotlight video are people that have got that one or are thinking of getting it. And out of my whole set of viewers, how many is that going to be? So they won't get the views, I'm afraid. They don't work that well from a channel point of view. For the individual that gets their special plant looked at and discussed, great. But they are very thin on the ground, so they don't work that well. I'm hoping that this collective thing with multiple genera, totally random, this set, they were chosen on the fact that they had some work done on them, not because of their genera. So I'm hoping this is more suited to more people. That's the idea. And I'll see you next time. Thanks for dropping by.